Hi, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Successes and Failures of Canadian Black Authors. So, how are we doing? How's everybody doing this evening?
Good.
Wonderful.
Really good.
Nice to see all of you. And the only person I really recognize is Alison because I've met her so many times and I just love her style. I'm sure that, if I read your books, I'm sure I would be able to appreciate that as well, but I haven't. So I would go to the lesser known authors by me. I'm sure you're very popular in your genre, but since I am not very familiar with both of you, would you mind giving a small introduction of the genre that you write in and what are the kind of books that you have published so far? So I'm going to go first to Janice and then to Meg. Meg, is it? Moji. I think I've met you also, Moji, previously. I have interviewed you, haven't I?
Well,
Yes, your name is very familiar.
maybe it might be a different Moji though.
Okay. Could be. Sorry. All
Mhm.
right. So let's start with Janice and then Moji, have a small introduction for yourself as well.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Hi, Allison and Moji. So I am actually not an author. I'm stepping in today for Odian Welch, who is an author. What I do, however, is I am an educator and I work for one of the largest school boards in Edmonton. And so my perspective today would be from the perspective of an educator and being able to hopefully provide some answers or some guidance on why we need representation for kids in our books, in our schools, and maybe what we're missing. So very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, sorry for being misinformed. So glad you're
Mhm.
here. Thank you. Um, and let's move to Moji Taibo.
Okay, my name is Moji Taiwo, and hello, Alison. It's good to see you again. Um, I my route and my journey is kind of different, and it's come around and about. I authored a memoir in 2018, which chronicles my journey as an immigrant in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And
Mhm.
during the COVID pandemic, I found that I was spending time with my grandchildren before, but during COVID, especially, I was doing a whole lot of things with them because they were home from school. And I was posting all those activities on social media. And somebody said that, well, this is a good idea. Why don't you do something with it? So I decided to write a children's book series
Wow.
because I'm a grandmother of three Black boys or children of color. And my children grew up in Canada, in Calgary. We rarely see any Black relatable books as a resource is either in the library or anywhere for that matter. And also, I thought about it that there are many grandparents of color in our community now. Why not bridge the gap? So I started writing children's book series.
Somebody seems to be getting a call or something. I don't know what it is.
Sorry, somebody
No
called me
problem.
up there. So I started writing a children's book series. So that's my story.
Thank you so much. That was such a great introduction to how you set foot into this area. Now I'm going to give the mic to our pretty popular lady, Alison. Alison, I've read some of your work and I'm quite familiar with what you write and really enjoy your writing. So I would like to kind of ask you this question: how did you step into this field?
I just always enjoyed reading, writing ever since I was a kid, and so it came naturally to me. So it's just a natural evolution
I
of
can
Genesis.
hardly hear you, Alison.
Oh, well, I don't know what to say. My mic is on.
Okay.
Anyway, so how is this? Can you hear me better? We'll go with it. I'm on the iPad, but it should work. Anyway, so it's a natural evolution for me. And I started writing since grade 6. And just
Wow.
always been really just interested in the word. And just with university, I was always still writing anyway. So it just evolved naturally. And then I finished my master's in English literature, focusing on children's literature. And that was the genesis of my career writing thesis, Phyllis. And then when I was done that, I submitted to some places, and the University of Calgary Press accepted it. So that was that genesis of that. Beforehand, while I was still in grad school, I was working on the Sisterhood trilogy.
Wow.
And so working, doing grad school, I don't know how I did it really. Working, doing grad school, and all these different things, I finished the Sisterhood trilogy. So I think that was a victory for me. And I found a publisher through the grad school program. And so that's what I did. And it was a UK press, and they really believed in the books. And then it was a natural bridge for me, I thought, to go from prose to poetry. But a lot of people don't know I started out in poetry first. That was
Oh,
my original genesis. And I've been with
how
the School of
interesting.
Poets in Edmonton, Parkland Poets. I've had a lot of poetry published now, various anthologies, won some poetry contests. But I want to mix it up, Mary, and do something different. And so that's why I went into the world of fantasy for 3 books. And so, in a way, I'm coming full circle and coming back into poetry. But I can say here, I'm working on a new fantasy series. That's all I'm going to tell people. And it's going well. But I have to find a publisher for this new series. Thank you. So we
That's
will
amazing.
see
Wow.
what happens next. We'll see what happens next. The publishing field is very challenging.
Oh,
And a
yeah.
lot of small presses have shut down. And now there's a lot of merging going on with the big 3, 5. I can't keep track anymore. And so a lot of small presses have gone under. So for
Oh,
authors, it's quite the odyssey to get your stuff mainstream published or with a traditional publisher. But I'm leaving it. I'm gonna let things manifest. If it's meant to be published, this new series, it will. If I do it a different way, okay. But I'm giving myself time because I believe in it. And I already have an audience with this sister series. And a lot of them like Phyllis to poetry. So I have even more of an audience. And it's like a demographics. It's like not just teens, young adult. It's a huge crossover. So a lot of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s who love my books too. So it's a huge crossover, which I think is another victory. And a lot of them love Phyllis. So it's like different worlds converging together, which I think, Mary, is quite exciting. So yeah,
Of
that's what I'm
course
up
it is.
to now. Yeah, yeah.
And we will come back to you after I talk to the educator here. Um, so Janice, my question is, what do you see Black kids reading these days? What do you see them reading? Do you see them reading at all?
Well, most kids, regardless of their race, are very much into graphic novels. I think that it speaks to an inability to sort of focus on the longer novels. That being said, I think that educators really have an opportunity to encourage kids by selecting novels that they would be interested in. So yes, we know graphic novels are what draws them because they can finish it rather quickly. There's less reading, all of those things. However, I think it's important because educators, we get to select the books that we read more times than not. And I believe that kids who obviously when they see themselves, they're much more interested in the actual content of the novel, right? So that's why I love when I hear like Moji and Allison talk about the series, right? Because that's when you grab kids. It's like you finish this one and there's more, right? There's another and there's an and, right? And I think that's really important to kind of think about if we are, you know, authors of color, how do we grab them? And then how do we keep them, right? So again, what are they interested in? Graphic novels. However, if teachers are selecting novels that kids will get interested in because they see themselves or because the storyline speaks of a culture that isn't already represented, then kids are suddenly awake, right? They want to know more about it. You know, recently the new Black Panther came out, and there's an author who, I can't remember the name of the author, unfortunately, but they wrote a novel about the Black Panther series. And like kids are eating that up right now. They're eating it up because it's something that's a reference point already. It's something that they see themselves in. They know Black Panther. They know the series. They're excited for the culture part of it. So if we can grab them and then hook them by making sure there are more, then I think we'll get them and keep them.
That's beautiful. Yeah. There's teach them young so they die with it, right? So I actually feel it's very important for kids growing up to know your culture and to be able to read it and identify with it. And I'm totally in sync with how you think about this. Because when I was growing up, I read predominantly Enid Blyton and Nancy Drew and all of those things where the culture was very English and people just ate bread and jam. Nobody ate our food. And I used to keep wondering, like, you know, what is this bread and jam? Because is it the rotis we have, or is it something else? And so it was a while before actually we you know, had bread, access to real bread, white bread. So it's funny because those are not things we really enjoyed. We had different kinds of foods which we thoroughly enjoyed, and people didn't seem to enjoy those in the books I read. They didn't seem to wear the clothes that my parents wore in those books. They didn't have similar interactions in their community. So those are the things that, you know, it helps to identify themselves with the characters. And so it's really nice to see Black authors come up and, you know, talk to them directly. However, it's kind of a little bit surprising to me to see most of the authors that I meet. Somebody's mic is on. If you can turn it off while I'm talking, it would help.
I am trying to change my phone to my computer here. I'll turn it
Okay.
off right away. So that I can fully participate. So
Sure.
let me leave. There we go. Is it better now?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not hearing that echo, so that's good.
Okay.
So so the point that I was trying to make here is that it's important to also have a representation of maybe males in your community or somebody else. Have you heard of male authors, male Black authors? Yeah.
Not necessarily Canadian. No, that's not true. Is it Garth Prince? Is that his name? Garth
Oh,
Gareth.
yeah.
Yeah, I believe he's Albertan. And
Oh,
he's
wow. Nice.
really written some really good things. But most of the authors that we hear from that are male are often American. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things that propel me. My children books are very, very simple because I'm not Allison. I'm not educated in my background. Was in broadcasting, telling stories, but not like, writing poetries and things like that. But nonetheless, I love telling stories to young children. So, and that's what I found is most of
the literatures that are in schools, the few of them that are for colored kids are American. So, and most of my series is actually not only relatable, but identifiable spots throughout the city of Calgary.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
totally
So
get
it's available on bookshelves, your books?
It's on Amazon and Ingram
Oh,
Spark.
fantastic.
Ingram Spark. And I'm trying to get the government, to see it as a resource so that it can be supplied to all libraries and all immigrant servicing agencies or things like that. So that's what I'm working on now.
That's awesome. I since Alison touched the topic about people of different ages and how her books transcend those, I just wanted to kind of broach a little bit about that. Have you thought about moving from like just children to other age groups of Black community?
Is that for me or Alison?
That's for you.
That's for me. Not right now. I think, like I said, it's a series I just completed and in my hands, like one of my grandson who says that until he gets a copy in his hands, I show him on the computer, it's not a real book. So I'm happy to say before I joined you, copies of book 2 and 3 arrived and I was able to sign it and give it to him as he leaves to go home. So
Aw.
once I complete the 5, I just reviewed and approved the illustrations for book 4 today. Once I complete the 5, which I hope to get done by the end of March, I'm going to try and market and promote wide first and take a breather. And of course, the grandchildren will be getting older. And as I follow them, the books naturally will get older to different
That's
groups.
beautiful. That's so beautiful. I mean, it's just an expression of your love for your grandkids. That's just awesome.
And
Um,
any kids for that matter. I spent 31 years working with teenagers.
yeah, it's really nice. So my question was, when we are young, we love to read. Like I was an avid reader growing up, and I actually chose and selected writings from different authors from different cultures when I realized what I was missing. So I would read Iranian authors, and then I would read African authors. And it was so much fun to see how different people wrote so differently about their cultures, and those things really moved me, and that's how I got interested in multiculturalism, and I started working in that sector for quite a while. um, but my question is, like, as we grow older, we are so busy working and we don't have time to read. Then comes a point in our lives where we are done all our responsibilities, the kids are gone away, and so then you have suddenly so much time. So I know that there are a lot of seniors who are in their 60s and 70s who love to read, and they love to pick up a book, they love to garden, they love to do things that they never got to do for maybe the 20-30 years of their life when they were raising their children. So is there any Black authors within our communities who also talk to this group of people?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know of any except for me because I have the crossover. So apart from me, I really don't know, honestly.
That would be an interesting thing to, broach and think
Yes.
about, because I think that's a sector that would really grab your books. So, Alison, how does
That's
the tone of
interesting.
your voice change with the different age groups? Did you want to add something, Moji?
I was just going to say that's an interesting thing. You said that and it pricked my brain. I mean, that age group, I'll be 65 next month. So while I'm tending to the grandkids, maybe I should also be thinking about, writing for seniors. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You're pretty much a young senior. So
I would like to think so. Yeah.
so I'm sure you can cater to them much better than somebody who's of a very young age group, because they wouldn't understand that phase of life.
Hmm.
So I really believe that there's a lot of potential in that sector, in that age group.
That's
Um,
thanks.
and so to Allison, my question is, how
Oh, what happened? What happened there?
authors of
Oh,
children's books need to keep in mind on how to talk to little kids? What is it that attracts them?
Oh, could you repeat the question? You kind of disappeared.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You
My
kind
internet
of
is not the
disappeared.
best.
You kind of disappeared.
So my question was, when you write for different age group audiences, of course, the tone of your voice is different, right? So, how do you shift the tone of your voice when you speak to different age groups?
See, I don't think about that. It just manifests naturally. So I wrote some children's books and I also illustrated them. So that
Hmm.
was The Adventures of Eli the Elephant and Eli Goes to the Moon. So that was from newborn children, babies, right? All the way up to maybe 4, 5, or 6. So that's a different demographic. So when I'm writing with that kind of narrative, it's a different shift, right? But I'm not really thinking that. I'm just thinking, I'll write this kid's book and illustrate. And the first one was a team effort. I had a girlfriend illustrate. The person helped me put together a CD that had me narrating the story. So I had the audio aspect too. And then I had another girlfriend with the editing. It was a independent publishing effort or self publishing. And then the second book, I took on illustration because my girlfriend went and became a lawyer. So she's gone. Like, wow, what did you? But when I was a kid, I used to draw a lot, and I had forgotten. That's another thing. We forget how our minds were more open as kids, and we forget what we used to enjoy as kids. And it's not until you tap back into it as adults that we remember. So I thought, you know what? I can do this thing. And so it's, oh, no, you can't. No, yeah, I can. And I did. And all the memories came back of me drawing, and I made my own comic books when I was a kid. So the illustration where I could do, I used a computer program to do the illustration. That was another odyssey. And that was very difficult. That took 2 or 3 years to do the graphics
yeah.
because I was doing everything, learning the computer program from the
Mhm.
ground up. I was doing it all myself. And that was quite the endeavor, but it was good. But what
Yeah, I'm sure the
the
illustrations is a great idea, because I remember even reading the Bible. I would love the Good News Bible, which had all these pictures, and I would just go running to the next picture and think, "Oh, this is so pretty!" And uh,
no,
and I remember even trying to copy those. So yeah, kids are very much drawn towards illustrations, and many of them like to try it on their own. So that also makes them interested.
Mhm.
How
so
do you
yeah,
find your books getting picked up? Do you like actually go to the schools and show it off to different schools, or how do you market them?
I used to go. I did a few school visits, and I was more on a mission with more Eli to actually go to schools and principals, and they bought my books and that kind of thing, and it just kind of manifested itself. I connected with some libraries and then chapters, bookstores, and that I found a way to get in there for my books. But that was years of work. Honestly,
Mhm.
Yeah.
years. It's not like instant. It's years of work doing it, and it's just me. I'm my
Yeah.
still very much now. Even now, still my own marketing machine. Still, even though I'm with University of Calgary Press, and they're really good, I still have to put in my 2 cents to help. But I'm finding when you climb up the ladder, each rung of the ladder, it gets easier. So
Yes.
now what UC
Hmm.
Press for Phyllis, they do a lot more in terms of marketing. It's easier. I don't have to do as much. But with the UK Press for the Sisterhood series, we all, us authors with the press, had to do a lot more work. So it's this trajectory from more small press, more UC Press, University of Calgary Press, which I think is more medium-sized press, really. They do more for you. And I kind of slowly go up the ladder and the rungs of the ladder. And you just learn the trajectory of how things work. But when you're with the small press, and then you learn more about marketing, and you learn a lot on the ground, which in a way is good. And you understand how different facets work together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's an interesting journey. And now with Phyllis, it's more creative moments, and I really thank University Calgary Press because I'm doing less, which is nice. I work so hard.
So you
I'm
can
doing
write
a lot
more.
less. They're promoting it more. And I'm doing the conference in Washington, D.C. That's exciting. It's another victory for me. And now we're doing a presentation based on my book, The Book of Poetry, Phyllis. And I was invited. I didn't call anybody. I didn't do anything. The work is reverberating, and it's taking on life of its own. And yes, I
Yes.
wrote the book and did the research, but people are now inviting, the word's getting out about the book. And I think it's quite the victory.
Do you find that your new book or one book sort of revives interest in other books that you've written before, or vice versa?
I think so. I mean, people know about the Sisterhood series and they'll pick that up. Some fans who more like the fantasy and the poetry, and that's fine. And I'm doing fantasy again, so they're excited. There are some of my readers who love both worlds, the fantasy and poetry, both genres, and that's nice too. And it's not just me, a lot of us authors like to mix it up with different genres because it's more interesting. You're just doing the same thing, you get kind of bored. So you want to vacillate and mix it up, you know. So I'm glad that the kids' books and also the set of the Eli Goes to the Moon. Then in young adult fantasy, which I really enjoy, but different demographics crossover, Sisterhood. And then did poetry with Phyllis, right? And now came back full circle into the fantasy again. So I just like doing different things. I just find it keeps me more on my toes, and it just keeps me more interested and excited when I mix the genres up. And most authors do that too, not just me, but I just find it more interesting to do that.
It allows your creative juices to flow.
I asked
So-
that question because I started with a memoir. And Alison, I think we met during that time that I was promoting the memoir in 2018. And then the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter events and COVID and everything happened in 2020, which actually propelled the book that I wrote in 2018, because some of my experiences in that book resonated and highlighted the challenge of marginalized people that now came to light. So some indie bookstores that were afraid to carry my books then, now my book is relevant. And then come 2022, late 2022, with the children's book starting, I find that I will go to speak at an event or go and read at elementary schools, and the teachers are now buying my memoir. So it kind of, it
All
helps.
works together. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for that little story extension to what Alison said. So that I'm sure works for every author, because, once people start enjoying reading what you write, they would like to try your other books. And so that's quite interesting to me. And I remember when I was young, I used to read Enid Blyton because I just enjoyed how lightly she wrote, so that's why I used to keep reading Enid Blyton. My question to you, Janice, is as you see, children are so much into instant gratification with videos and TikTok and everything that they see around them. How do you pull them back into the literary world?
I think it's a societal challenge, right? There's this famous adage that say readers are born on the laps of their parents, right? So if their parents are very focused on their phones and are very focused on television and using tablets as a babysitter, which I understand, we're all very busy. I think that there's a greater likelihood that we're not going to raise readers, right? And so we're living in a society now where technology is king, right? And so my son is often very much like, Mom, I like to read, but could you just get me an audiobook so I don't have to read it? Like, I'm like, no. It's really important for us to physically hold the book, right? I'm like talking to him about how I love the smell of the pages, right? But what I've had to find is that I have to model that for him. And I did the same with my students as well, right? So if I for many years, I taught grade 6, and during silent reading time, that's like the perfect time to do attendance, to organize your groups, to do a little bit of marking. But what I was realizing is I'm pushing these kids to read for 20, 30 minutes of silent reading, but I'm not modeling them for that, right? So I started to pull out my book and I put up my feet and I would enjoy it. Every now and then I would pull up, what just happened? Or this is so good, right? Vocal about it so they could see me being excited. And then without a doubt, some kid would be like, what were you reading? And I'd be like, oh, let me come tell you, right? Creating a little bit of excitement around the action of reading was really important for me. So in the end, I had a classroom that, to be honest with you, many of the kids were reluctant readers, but I was very purposeful in what I selected for them to read. I always started with what I call bums in seats. Okay. So if I had kids in my class that were Southeast Asian, those are the books that I was going to have on my bookshelf. The majority of them were going to be that. If I have a lot of Muslim kids in my room, I'm going to make sure that I have Muslim books on my shelf, right? So making sure that they can see themselves first so that we can have conversations and we can talk about it, right? So we're talking about Gary because we read about it in a book that we read. And then it's like the kid that is Nigerian is like, I know what Gary is. Everybody is invested, right? Everybody wants to talk about what they're reading. Everybody wants to share. So I model with my own children and I modeled with my students as well. And I think that's something that is absent from our society today because we're all too busy. We're all too, focused on all sorts of other things. And so kids are not learning the importance of that sitting and enjoying that book, right? Or the smell of the pages or the look of the cover and the, where did the author who did they highlight to thank? We don't know that anymore because we're so busy scrolling through TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah, sadly true. But what a great idea. I mean, I totally hats off to that. I'm so impressed. And I hope that our audience who's listening today is also going to mimic some of the stuff that you've done with your children. Because to me, it's such a tragedy of this generation that people are moving away from books to all kinds of, electronic medium. And we are kind of losing the hold we had on language. I seriously feel that because I used to be an editor and I used to write a lot myself. So I feel that when I read other people's work, it just bothers me. There is no proper construction of sentences and there is no proper spelling. And in those days when we were growing up, it was so important that you write correct spelling and your grammar is right. And I don't know, it's very bothersome to me. I don't know how many people, worry about it and lose their sleep at night, but I do sometimes. And especially when my own kids, who should have much better English because I speak to them quite well, don't. And that bothers me so much. So, I'm sure there's a lot of kids who've grown up with, the Wren and Marden. We've done grammar from really big books, and we really used to enjoy, using those in our own vocabulary, who miss that kind of education these days. So that's another thing that, I'll come back to you about. Maybe you can talk about how, as a society, we can remedy that. But before that, let me go to Allison. What do you think, Allison, were the biggest setbacks in your literary career? And what are the things that you did to remedy that?
I think just as a writer of color, there are a lot of obstacles. And I was reading some articles lately, and then there's another African American. He set up his own press, and he was talking to a lot of Black authors, and they weren't getting published. And he was reading their work, and it's like, it's of quality. Why aren't these people getting published? And he found there was a common theme. And then with his own work, I think a doctoral student was using one of his books as a subject for their dissertation, which is pretty good. And he was indie published at the time, but he also had a battle trying to get a mainstream publisher. So he set up his own publishing house. And I just think, unfortunately, it's a battle to get picked up. And there are a lot of publishing houses, they don't want to hear our stories. And you really have to battle to get in there. And it's not about the lack of quality. It's about they don't want to hear us. And so you have to find people you connect with who will hear our stories. And that's still very
Wow.
much a battle even today.
Oh, wow.
Still today.
So what are the kind of things you can do to make yourself visible and your voice to be loud enough?
Well, I use the social media, but also as much as I can. Now, with this new landscape that started March 2020, a lot of things have shut down, right? And it was more online. So I did some online, but mainly I still find face to face is the most important, and going to physical events when we can do it and connecting with people face to face. And I find that's the most effective. And things will then manifest themselves. You can't just do the online. It's useful, online events and so on, but really in the end, the face to face is the most effective. And that's why I find you find people support you, you find allies who believe in your work, and it goes from there. So I'm hoping with this new series, it will eventually be picked up. But I remember there's a poet I know, and he's a professor at UT, and it took him 6 years for one of his books to be picked up. A book of poetry. He's very good. It took him 6 years.
I will be
That's
done
crazy.
before they pick mine up.
And so, and he's higher than me, much higher up, and he had problems. So I'm not the only one. So it shows you we still have a battle on our hands, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna give up. I'm kind of doing some other things right now, and I'm taking a break. And then when I finish, it's gonna be a trilogy. When it's a trilogy, I'll try again. And it was meant to be published with the traditional publisher. We'll see what happens. But I'm not going to give up on it. And this is one thing I advise for people of color who want into writing. You really have to be perseverant. You really have to be on a mission. And you really have to be focused. And when people say no, ignore it and keep going until you find the yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll be doors slammed in your face. And you got to keep going and not be perturbed and keep going until you find the door that opens. And I feel I really tell people that. And not just people of color, women, anybody. But especially for us, it's very difficult. I'm being honest. It's a battle.
Yeah.
And it's a miracle I'm still in this field. But I have stick-activity, perseverance. I'm on a mission. There are things I want to achieve. There are things I want to say. And no one's going to stop me. And I keep going. But if you don't have that, if you don't have that, you're sunk. And I'm being honest. You really
Thanks so much, Allison, for sharing that, because that's a difficult story of vulnerability, and all of us go through those things. I'm so glad that you have the grit to persevere and to move through that. Thank you. Moji, what are the kind of setbacks do you think that you would consider as really setbacks, and how did you move through that? And what are the things that you would advise other Black authors to do?
Well, for me, just echoing what Allison said, but the challenge, and I also have a question for Allison before you forget. For me, I was able to carry on in spite of all the rejections, because writing, I don't make my livelihood from writing. So in that case, I don't have as much pressure. I approach a few people and they say, oh, no, I even had people that says, oh, Calgary, Alberta is not ready for this candidness and this or that. Maybe you should have written it as a novel so that it's not. I said, no, I don't want to pretend. This is my story. And there are so many lessons in there to be learned by other people. At the same time, the main population, the general population, the ordinary person need to know what people of color go through daily here in our ordinary life, in our institutions, and on and on. But that is not to say that it's supposed to be a blemish on anybody's eyes. It's just an eye-opening. It's just an awareness. So that might be difficult for somebody who wants to write to make a living.
Yeah.
So that is that. With the children's book, because it has to do with illustration and storytelling, I'd apply for 1 or 2 grants, even not so much for the publishing, but just for the arts in the book. And I put, just to make sure that I'm not reading any meaning into anything, I put all the rejection letters together, and they're exactly the same.
Wow.
From the grants that all of us need to have access to, the government grants, the Alberta government grants for arts, a local illustrator, the sample of the work is attached. It's so beautiful, and on and on. And for marketing, the plan was laid out and attached, but you still get denied by saying, oh, we received too many applications and we don't have enough funds to cover everyone. So we will get back to you should extra funds become available. In other words, no. So that's an obstacle. And in the application there, they ask, if we should say no to your project, will you still be able to carry on? Am I going to say no? I'm not going to say no, because I will carry on, like Allison said.
Yeah. So basically, you invested into this project yourself.
Yes. You have to persevere. You have to believe in your product. You have to believe in your project. You have to be passionate about it, So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Moji. Now I'm just going to go to Janice and, regurgitate the question that I put earlier. So it was about, how as a community, we are losing our hold on language, and how, as an educator, do you think, can we change this for the next generation? Or can we ever? I don't know.
You know what? I spent 4 years in Korea. And I remember working with some of those Korean teachers, and they knew English grammar better than I knew English grammar. They could tell me the rules and why the rules were the way that they were. They would ask me questions and I'd be like, I don't know, I just say it that way. And they would say, okay, but this agreement doesn't work with this. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? Because for generations now, we have not explicitly taught grammar in schools. Now, I think, Mary, part of it is that we have lost our capacity for it. Teachers are incredible, but they are also overwhelmed, right? And so the challenges, especially, in this post-COVID era, the challenges are 20-fold, right? So unfortunately, grammar and things like proper construction of sentences, things like that kind of go out the window when you have kids who are struggling with their mental health, right? Kids that are struggling with their behaviors, kids that are struggling with, food insecurity because their parents have lost their jobs, kids that are struggling with motivation. It's kind of hard to teach some of those more difficult concepts, especially because for the most part, teachers are mandated by the curriculum, and the curriculum is very vague. It's not like you must teach the structure of this and they must understand this, and this. It's sort of like by the end of this grade, they need to know that a capital letter goes at the beginning of a sentence, and it needs to know that a period goes at the end, right? So to do the things that are, really required for us to formulate very complex sentences, no one has the time for it anymore, right? You're also having teachers that are dealing with a very high or in a rise in the ELL population, right? Mm-hmm. So they're struggling with, for example, when I taught grade 6, I had students that ranged from kindergarten level in terms of their communication and their writing skills, like kindergarten level that were in grade 6, right? How do I support those students? It's easy enough to say, oh, well, the grade 6s could benefit from kindergarten level, so teach everybody the same thing, but that's not how it works, right? So you basically end up trying to triage. And that's what most teachers, especially post-pandemic, are doing right now. They're sort of like, okay, we're going to do the best that we can, but unfortunately, we're getting a lot less money from the government these days to be able to bring in people to help. There's less educational assistance. There's less programs to support the work that we're doing. Yet the challenges continue to come. So essentially, they're doing the best that they can, but it's hard to do more with less, right? So I don't know, Mary, I don't know what the solution is. I think
it's what you say, what I hear you say is it's a part of the evolution of our curriculum. And so this is how it's going. And, there are more important priorities for educators, which they have to focus on. And I agree with that because I see a lot more mental health issues than when we had more caring societies without gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
So
step into the parents have to, right, take up more of a responsibility in regards to how we're supporting our students. Some parents are doing a phenomenal job. They're like, no, we work on this in the evenings together, because we have to understand there's a shift that's happening in education now. And so if we are not all working together and we're just pointing fingers, we're not going to gain any ground, right? We need to work more cooperatively together.
Thank you for that, Janice. I'm just quickly going to go to Allison and then Moji to talk about, what are the biggest successes that you've experienced in your writing career, and what are the things that you would do to, what else? What are the other goals that you've set up for yourself?
Okay. I think being invited to this conference in Washington, D.C. is a victory. Because it's a word of mouth thing, and I didn't do anything. The work is speaking for itself, and that's just so nice to hear. And it's an American professor actually is really interested in Phyllis and my other work, and she invited me to be part of this conference in DC. So it's a victory, really. And so it's a testament. So when Moji was talking about writing and the 2020 pandemic and isolation, and George Floyd, I think for the Black community, it's hard for a lot of us. Emotionally draining. I still can't watch the entire video, what happened to him. I still cry when I think about it. And that kind of influenced the writing of Phyllis, because of what she went through as a Black person, Black woman, is still what we're dealing with now. With her being enslaved, all the stuff she had to go through, the institutional racism, not only to publish her book of poetry, but to get her freedom, right? And so that all reverberated. But people were calling me when I was writing Phyllis, which was really nice. And again, I wasn't asking. They were just calling me, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Because they knew it was a very upsetting time. And that meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me. And then wonderful Fraser and all that. But just people calling me to see emotionally, mentally, are you okay? As a human being, as a right as a human being, I still consider that as a victory too.
That's lovely. That's so true.
Actually. People care. I think also with the sister series, people still reading the books, buying the books. I think, me graduating from grad school, I'm the first one to graduate with a master's degree in my family, and that's a victory. And I just think back, my great grandmother was a slave. She worked on the plantation Barbados. And to see the trajectory of her to her grandkids and my dad, his siblings, some are nurses, some went to banking. And the great grandkids, so me, the cousins, some are nurses, some are musicians. I'm the rare teacher, one's a doctor, and the trajectory of that links into it too. And Phyllis was highly educated because she was a child prodigy, right? Learning Greek and Latin at a very early age. She was a child prodigy. And so a lot of victories I'm seeing as a person of color that honestly I wouldn't have foreseen, really. I think it's such a victory. I think my great grandmother Rosalie is very happy. Say, Allison, keep going. All you great grandkids, keep going. Keep going. And so I see all these victories, and it's very inspiring, and it motivates me to continue. And now I'm on this path. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep forging forward now. I really feel a momentum and a motivation. And the army of light, like I talk about in the sister books, it is growing and it's going global. And I think that is also a victory.
Thank you, Allison. That's truly inspirational. My goodness, what a lovely journey. Thank you for that. I'm personally inspired. I want to just ask Moji before we close, because we are coming to the close of our 1 hour interview. So Moji, could you tell us about the successes that you've experienced in your writing career? How many years has it been?
Well, for me, okay, I formally retired from the government of Alberta in May 2015. And I was taking care of a brand new grandson. And I was finding myself restless and nothing to do when the baby is sleeping. That's when I started writing a memoir, because having worked for all those years, all of a sudden, so that in itself, it's a success that I was able to write my memoir in 18 to 2 years while I was taking care of a grandson. But my success is beyond that, because I actually studied radio journalism, broadcast journalism, and I was not allowed to advance to actually hone my skills in broadcasting because of those inherent institutional racism. That forced me to change the course of my career. So I ended up going back to university and changing, and end up working with young people within the correctional system in Alberta for 31 years. And during that time, I was the only Black and female that moved up through the ranks to management before I retired in 2015. So now I wrote this book, and then I wrote this children's book, which has taken me back to where I started from originally. And I must tell you that on February 28th this year, I will be speaking at the university where I graduated from.
Wow, congratulations.
From that book, I will be speaking there. And just last night, I was one of the speakers at the government building here in Calgary, and the Premier of Alberta was there.
Wow.
Speaking on where we've come from, where we are, the champions amongst us, and what we want the government and the society to do in form of equity and inclusion. Equity for our children and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We want to remember those people who have paid ways back there, but there are champions amongst us here now. And we need to be focusing on the champions in the making and what that will look like. what it takes to get there. So those are my successes. Mary, you are muted.
A call. Sorry, people. I don't know why that came in, despite the fact that I'm on StreamYard. Anyway, so I just want to thank you all for this beautiful interview, which inspired me tremendously because, you know, I have been thinking about writing a memoir of my life because I've traveled to so many countries and I had the opportunity to live in a few. And I have actually really studied how different cultures operate. And that to me is something that you know I would love to share, and it's a deep interest in people of different cultures, behaviors, and how they're different just because of the environments they were raised in,
Yeah.
and the kind of you know availability of food and all of those things is quite interesting. And so I have been you know like from inside motivated to write this, but not motivated enough. Now, after speaking to you, maybe you know you might see me join you, all of you, next time as one of the other authors of
get
Multicultural
going,
Descent.
once you get going, it just flows.
And there's
Thank you.
there's
That's
room for
really
all
nice.
of us, right? There's room for all of us.
Yes.
Yes, because everybody's story has a certain thread that will connect with somebody, and so that's why I think it's really nice when people start sharing their stories, and they live forever through somebody who's read it. So thank you so much for all the efforts that you make to make this happen and to be able to see that, you know, like you will live on forever in the hearts of people who've read your book. Thank you so much for the work you do.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Alison.
Thank
Thank
you for
you,
having
Mary.
us.
Nice to meet you,
Thank you.
Janice.
You too, Moji and Allison. I'm also inspired by both of you. I have your books in my cart in Amazon right now.
Good. Happy
Wow.
Janice.
Thank you. Please, I want to hear from you.
Yes, I feel the same.
I will let
Contact
you know.
us.
I will. You know what? I'm always looking for ways to be able to bring authors of color into the classroom with the different schools that I visit. So trust me, I'll be talking to some people.
Excellent.
Yeah, you can connect post this interview amongst yourselves. But I will have to close. Thank you so much again for your time, and I'm going to take your leave. Thank you. Bye.
Thank